Welcome back to the review space. In this video, we're going to take a look at the top 10 most overrated professional wrestlers of all time. Actually, these are the top 10 pro wrestlers, in my opinion, that are overrated, very overpushed, and just ranked way too highly and given too much credit, given too many title runs, and in my opinion, is just highly overrated. They were ranked way too high. So let's begin. Number 1, Triple H. Triple H is a 14-time world champion. Between the WWE World title and the World Heavyweight title, this guy has been champion 14 times. He was PWI number 1 wrestler of 2000. He main evented WrestleMania many times. He's won at WrestleMania quite a few times as well. I remember him defeating guys like The Rock. I remember him defeating and going over many different talented wrestlers in the early 2000s during the so-called Reign of Terror. That was a hard time for WWE fans and Raw fans specifically. He dominated that brand. And he's known for being a guy that would essentially go over the other talented wrestlers. People like a Booker T and an RVD. A Goldberg, Scott Steiner, and many different other wrestlers that have tremendous amount of value that they can add to the table. But with Triple H, he just ends up winning and winning and winning and winning. And it wasn't until guys like Batista started defeating him. Even somebody like Randy Orton. I remember him going over Randy. Randy became champion. And granted, maybe he wasn't ready for it at the time in 2004. But Triple H won it back right away. Granted, with Triple H, he is a very talented guy. He's a great heel, so he is a really strong villain type of character. You know, he's mentioned before that there needs to be a Darth Vader in WWE, around the time of guys like Stone Cold and The Rock, and the late 90s, early 2000s. But with Triple H, in my opinion, he was never on the same level as somebody like The Rock back in the late 90s, somebody like Stone Cold, not even against somebody like Shawn Michaels. HBK, in my opinion, was a way more talented, overall better performer than Triple H. Triple H had a great look. He was good on the mic. He could cut a pretty good promo, but I feel like he was a lot less charismatic than many of the other charismatic wrestlers. He was a lot less likable. He wasn't really that interesting. He wasn't. There was nothing amazing about him aside from he had a great look. He could talk pretty good, and he was a pretty decent in-ring worker. He's been given credit before by other guys like Bret Hart. Bret Hart said he was a decent worker. But with Triple H, I feel like he's never had. He's not an amazing in-ring performer. He's not an incredible in-ring, amazing, must-see wrestler. I feel like he's a basic wrestler. He's got the fundamentals down. He's a good technical performer. He can put on a good match. But as far as having 5-star classic matches every single time, I think it depends with Triple H. It largely depends when he's working against somebody like an Undertaker. I think Undertaker, he's a great worker, so Undertaker can have a good back and forth with Triple H. It just depends with Triple H. For the most part, I feel like his matches are just bleh. His matches are nothing special, and his matches don't really stand out that much. Triple H, again, a legendary figure. But I feel like him being a 14-time champion, it's just the company's way, WWE's way of saying, well, this is our guy. This is going to be this is the owner, pretty much. You know, he's married into the McMahon family, so it's basically like another McMahon being a champion. It's basically just the family itself dominating professional wrestling. There really is nothing much to Triple H, in my opinion. I feel like he is a very overrated wrestler. Doesn't mean that he's a bad wrestler. He's definitely a much better, more solid worker than many of the other guys, but he's overrated for sure. Number 2, Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Hollywood Hulk Hogan, in my opinion, is easily one of the most overpushed, overrated wrestlers of the 90s. Certainly in WCW. He was shoved down people's throats. When I started watching regularly in late 97, 98, something like that, in the late 90s, mid-late 90s, Hogan was on top in WCW, and he was always the champion. He was always the world champion in WCW. It was like he just had a dominant monopoly on the frickin' title. The younger guys couldn't get over on him. Very few times where he would work with the younger guys or a new, fresh face, aside from maybe a Goldberg or somebody else. But with Hulk Hogan, my goodness, he was the leader of that NWO. He was the focal point. He was cutting all the promos. He got a lot of airtime to speak. He got a lot of money out of it, which is good for him. He got a huge payday from Ted Turner, and he was given a lot of money for doing that. But the thing with Hogan was that no matter how much he contributed to the success of WCW, he also contributed to the downfall of it by just having this monopoly over WCW, by having the main event spot the whole time, the attention focused on him. He had a lot of political power, of course, and he had a lot of creative control. So with Hulk Hogan, I feel like he was just, and he was so lazy in the ring. Not lazy, but I mean, I think in the ring he was so limited. He didn't do much in the ring. He wasn't performing amazing moves. He wasn't an amazing in-ring worker. He just did the basics. He just did basic moves. A big boot. He'll do a leg drop, here and there. And, a body slam. Certain moves that were just basic Hogan moves. I think in the 80s it worked. He was a superhero type of character. But with Hulk Hogan during the 90s, I feel like he was extremely overrated because his matches weren't classic. I feel like as a worker, he was pretty damn good on the mic. He was a good heel in that regard, but as far as in-ring performance, he was incredibly boring. He was not impressive, and his matches now, especially watching them now, are just largely outdated. People responded well to him because he was a very charismatic guy, and he built a huge following during the 80s and early 90s, but as far as the mid-late 90s as Hollywood Hulk Hogan, he was extremely overrated. Number 3. Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit, this Canadian crippler, the Wolverine from Canada. Chris Benoit is regarded as one of the greatest technical workers in the ring. Very good inside the ring, very strong technical wrestler, very stiff, very intense in some ways. Chris Benoit, in my opinion, was highly overrated. I feel like he was lacking so much charisma. I'm a promo guy, so I appreciate guys who can cut a promo and guys who are amazing on the microphone, because I feel like that's where their personality shines through. That's where they can emote, and they can project their voice, and they can develop their character through speaking. With Chris Benoit, I felt like on the microphone he was extremely lackluster. He wasn't impressive on the mic. He was basically, I'm not going to say he was the worst at cutting promos, but he was a pretty bad promo compared to other people who can cut on the good promos on the mic. With Chris Benoit, again, a great technical in-ring performer, nothing against him, but I feel like even in the mid-2000s, early mid-2000s, he was very repetitive. His style was very repetitive. He would have amazing moves. He threw a great suplex. He had great submission moves. But I feel like, especially in the mid-late 2000s, around 2004, 2005, 2006, and just before his death in 2007, I felt like he was extremely repetitive, his in-ring style. And maybe it's just because it was the WWE, more limited WWE style, where he only has to do a few moves to get by. But overall, his suplexes, and he would just have the same moves over and over again. His chops, his constant chops. It was a very predictable match with Chris Benoit, and unless he was working with an amazing somebody who he feuded with in the past, somebody like a Booker T, or somebody like a Chris Jericho, or Eddie Guerrero, or somebody like that. And that's another thing. Eddie Guerrero was like his best friend, one of his best friends, and he came up with him. But the thing is, Eddie Guerrero was amazing on the mic, great technical wrestler. I would say Chris Benoit is a little bit better than Eddie Guerrero in terms of technicality, but as far as the rest, he was blown away by Eddie Guerrero. I think Eddie Guerrero was far more charismatic, much better on the microphone. So, that's a perfect example of two comparable wrestlers as far as size-wise and their history coming up together. Eddie, I think, was far more valuable. He was just a better overall wrestler than Chris Benoit because he was a more complete package. He could cut a promo. He was charismatic. He was great in the ring. Chris Benoit was great in the ring, but he was lacking a lot of charisma, in my opinion. He was very intense, but he lacked mic skills and charisma. So that's something that, in my opinion, he wasn't the best wrestler of 2004. Maybe the hardest hitting. He was the most intense of 2004, and he was certainly pushed, especially winning that WrestleMania. But to me, Benoit was a very overrated worker. Number 4, Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio. Booyaka, booyaka. Yes, this was definitely, Rey Mysterio is one of the most popular, if not the most popular luchador of all time. Masked Mexican wrestler. Or wrestler of Mexican origin. I believe he's Mexican-American. San Diego and all that. But with Rey Mysterio, I feel like he's highly overrated. I remember as a kid playing the WCW video games, WCW Revenge, and playing that with my friend. And we would play that on the N64, and his favorite wrestler from WCW was Rey Mysterio. So he would always play as Rey Mysterio Jr. And I never understood that. I never saw it. He would always mark out for Rey Mysterio. He would talk about how, oh, he's my favorite, he's the best, he's awesome, and he would pick Rey Mysterio, and I wasn't allowed to. You know, I would come over and I would pick somebody else. I'd pick like Juventud or Goldberg or whoever. He'd be like, no, don't pick Rey Mysterio. You're not allowed. You know, he's my guy. I'm gonna choose him. And so I've never understood the appeal of Rey Mysterio Jr. I could understand maybe in the 90s when he was a better, more flashy in-ring performer. He was lighter, he was younger, so his in-ring prowess was more pronounced. He was having pretty impressive matches in the ring, and he was having a lot of, like, you know, cruiserweight matches, for example, in WCW. Very high-flying, aerial, very cruiserweight heavy, very impressive as far as the aerial maneuvers and the flippity dives and all that, and the amazing Hurricane Ranas that he would do. He was tremendous in that regard. But even back then in the late 90s, I just didn't see it in terms of his charisma or his appeal. I felt like he was too small. He wasn't believable as far as competing with the bigger guys, and I felt like, especially on the microphone, again with the microphone, much like with the Chris Benoit thing, on the microphone, cutting a promo, I feel like Rey Mysterio was lacking a lot of those things. He was lacking microphone skills. He didn't really cut a lot of promos, and maybe that's not his fault. You know, him not being able to cut a lot of promos, that's not necessarily, he wasn't given a lot of time anyway. But I just think that he's not a good promo cutter anyway. I mean, in the 2000s when he went to the WWE, and throughout his career in WWE, he just never cut a good promo. I can't remember a single solid, amazing promo from Rey Mysterio. I feel like he was lackluster on the mic. He was very boring on the mic. He didn't have much charisma as far as projecting his personality, as far as having that amazing, like, I gotta see him talk, I gotta see him, his personality shine through, and it just doesn't. He was basically a superhero of WWE. He had the mask and everything, and the kids loved him. He sold a lot of merchandise. So in that sense, he was very valuable. But as far as being WWE champion or the world champion, and just him winning all these titles, I felt like he wasn't really that great. I thought he was highly overrated, and he had his place in the company, but he was just overrated in my opinion. I wouldn't rank him as one of the best. I think that as far as masked wrestlers, there's better guys out there. Somebody like the guys from Lucha Underground, for example. Those individuals over there, especially that guy who can cut a great promo. Pentagon Junior or Pentagon Dark. I think he's great on the mic. Even though, yeah, it's mostly he cuts promos in Spanish, but you can just tell that this guy is amazing on the microphone. This guy, if he was able to speak in English, and you can. He's able to speak English properly, and he was fluent in English, he would be able to cut great, amazing promos as well. The kind of guy that would go back and forth with somebody like a CM Punk. So there are luchadors out there that can cut good promos, and I think that Rey Mysterio is not one of them. Number 5, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett is easily one of the most over-pushed wrestlers of all time. Now, as far as overrated, I mean, he would probably be an overrated wrestler just on the technical thing of him being a TNA champion for so long. They pushed him down our throats as the TNA champion. He was TNA World Champion, NWA, back in the day, NWA TNA champion. When TNA was basically in its first few years of, not even the first few years, the first like 5 years of TNA, Jeff Jarrett was just constantly on top. From 2002 to around like 2006, 2007. He was just always the champion. He dominated that main event. He was constantly being pushed as the top guy of TNA. And on some level I can understand him because he is he's from the Jarrett family, and from what I understand, they're the ones that started TNA. The Jarretts, they're the promoters. I mean, before they were basically bought out by Dixie Carter, or Dixie Carter got the majority ownership of the company or something like that. But Jeff Jarrett was still, in many ways, the main event player. He was like the Triple H of TNA. I remember them calling Jeff Jarrett back in the day. They called him, was it Triple J? Triple J. They called him Triple J back in the day, as a parody of Triple H, because it's he was Double J. Well, he was Triple J, because the way the Triple H would bury so many people and just dominate as this annoying heel, this cowardly heel. Jeff Jarrett was kind of the same way in the early mid 2000s in TNA. He was Triple J, even though it's double J, Jeff Jarrett. But anyway, Jarrett was constantly pushed down our throats. I didn't particularly think he was like super charismatic. He was okay on the microphone. I thought he had a pretty decent look, but he just looked like a mid-carder that was trying to be a main eventer. He didn't feel convincing to me as an amazing big draw that everybody wanted to see. He was just kind of there. He was just the bad guy that they had for that company. He was just the designated main guy. But I felt like there were other guys that could have carried TNA that should have been the top guy. Somebody like an AJ Styles. Somebody like a Samoa Joe. And many of the other younger guys that maybe they weren't as big names as Jeff Jarrett. They weren't as recognizable, but I felt like Jeff Jarrett was just constantly pushed down our throats, highly overrated. In my opinion, Jarrett didn't really draw anything as far as being a main event player. I felt like he was extremely... he was a vanilla type of guy. He was very vanilla. He felt very vanilla. There was no oomph to him. There was no amazing thing that I gotta go watch Jeff Jarrett. Aside from his theme music. I thought his theme song was really cool. But aside from that, he was overrated. Number 6. Trish Stratus. Trish Stratus, to me, is probably the most overrated female wrestler / diva of all time. Certainly from the WWE. In the early mid-2000s, Trish Stratus dominated the female division. The Divas division, Women's division, whatever you want to call it. She was always on top. It seemed like she was always on top. She was given a lot of media exposure. She was always doing magazine covers. She did a lot of fitness covers. I don't believe she ever did a Playboy, but I'm sure she was offered to do it. If she did, then my memory doesn't serve me correct. But she still did a lot of other media type cover. She was always doing magazine type related covers and photo shoots. But that's part of the reason why she was pushed so highly, was because, from what I understand, she was very good as far as like being a backstage darling. In other words, she was willing to do things. She was easy to work with, basically, and she had a great personality. You can tell that, and I'm not bashing her personality, but as far as being a character, as far as her in-ring talent, I felt was very lacking. In the ring, in my opinion, she didn't have many great matches. I felt like they were very, very basic Divas matches. The ones that really stood out were her matches against somebody like Lita. In my opinion, Lita was a really good worker for her time. She was great. She was a high flyer. She had a great look. And she had a very alternative look to her, and that complemented Trish really well. And for that time, I think in the early 2000s, 2004, around that time, women's wrestling, the Divas division, was not particularly impressive anyway. It wasn't amazing. So with Trish, she stood out, and her matches and her presence stood out even more because she was surrounded by these mediocre, really subpar women of the time, these models, these women that weren't trained to be amazing in-ring workers, but rather they were picked from a magazine catalog or an underwear catalog. So I think that was the problem with Trish, was that she was good on the mic, she seemed really comfortable in front of the camera, she had a good look, she was a very beautiful blonde woman, but at the same time, as far as in-ring matches, she never really impressed me that much. I feel like, especially now, the women now, like a Sasha Banks, Charlotte, Bayley, Becky Lynch, these women now destroy Trish Stratus in the ring. it's not even close. I think that Stratus would get decimated by the women today because the in-ring ability of Trish was highly overrated. I think she was just pushed down her throat. She was the women's champion so many times. I think even at one point she held the women's title for like a year, from 2005 to 2006 or something like that, and she was just constantly pushed down their throats. I think she was very lackluster and really nothing special. Number 7, Edge. Edge, Adam Copeland, is an 11-time champion. So this was before he retired, and he was able to retire as the world champion, which is just amazing for him. That's good for him. But with Edge, I feel like he was very overrated. There was really nothing special about Edge aside from him being just different, him being from the Attitude Era, and that was cool when he became champion for the first time in early 2006 at New Year's Revolution, I think, and he defeated John Cena when he cashed in the first Money in the Bank cash-in, and that was a great moment and everything. But I feel like his character changed too much, where he used to be the rated R superstar, this edgy, and no pun intended, Edge is edgy, blah 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 blah. But I felt like they were taking him to a very mature. That was a mature, cool gimmick, the rated R superstar, and I was digging it. And then they kind of changed it into just this villainous heel, this cowardly heel, this annoying heel. He was very bland to me. He was very bland. His promos were bland on the microphone. I thought he would stutter a lot and he would stammer here and there, and I felt like his mic skills were just not nearly up to par compared to some of the better microphone workers out there. Somebody like a Macho Man Randy Savage, or a Ric Flair, or Rock, or CM Punk. I thought Edge was very, very generic. I thought on the microphone he was so bland, and he was very boring in my opinion as far as cutting a promo. Technically on the microphone he was okay. He was an okay talker, but as far as displaying this amazing personality or having memorable quotes or having a memorable promo, they're very few and far between. He was given a lot of airtime to speak. He was given a lot of camera time. He was given a big push from the mid-late 2000s and up until he retired in I believe it was 2011. So he was given a lot of title reigns as well. He was just constantly given title shot after title shot, title win after title win, championships after championships, and through it all, he never felt like the guy. He never felt like the main guy. He was always, for the most part, he was designated at SmackDown. SmackDown was basically the secondary TV show, so he was like the main villain on SmackDown. But so what? It was SmackDown, and he was the secondary champion. He was the world. I think it was a record time 7-time world champion with a big gold belt. So. And so that was more than the WWE title reigns that he had, which was, I think he won it 4 times. So anyway, Edge had great matches in his career. I'm not taking that away from him. He's a pretty good in-ring worker. He's had some classic matches, singles and tag team. So can't take that away from him. But as far as being constantly pushed and shoved down our throats, Edge, in my opinion, was a pretty overrated wrestler. Number 8, Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan, definitely. In my opinion, Daniel Bryan, DB, was one of the most overrated wrestlers of the past 5 years. The 2010s, for sure, he would probably be up there. I feel like his character was so one-dimensional. He would just go, yes, yes, and point his fingers in the air. Point his finger in the air. Just go, yes, 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 and that was his gimmick. In my opinion, that was a very bland gimmick. That was a very cheesy gimmick, very simplistic and very childish, very dumbed down. It was a very basic, simple-ass gimmick that I didn't really connect with. I appreciated that it got over with the crowd, and the entire arena would chant that word. They would say yes, yes, and just to this day they would still chant yes when they would agree with somebody in the ring. But that being said, Daniel Bryan to me was not particularly memorable. There was really not much to him. He didn't feel like a big star in my opinion. He got a lot of crowd chants, but I felt like he didn't draw the audiences. He wasn't a huge draw. He was just a popular guy at the time. He was popular, but only within the context of the limited fan base that the WWE. I didn't feel like he expanded the WWE fan base. He didn't draw in the casual audiences. I felt like Daniel Bryan was a hipster indie favorite with a big beard. He looked like a mountain man, and he was a smaller guy. And so that was his appeal, was that he was a hipster favorite. He was the alternative. He was the favorites of somebody that was maybe a diehard indie fan, but not so much the casual fan walking down the street like, oh, I don't give a shit about Daniel Bryan. If you ask somebody that used to love the big stars of back in the day, of Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock and Randy Savage and those kind of guys, Daniel Bryan would not even be in their top 50 list of the best wrestlers of all time. And same here. I honestly don't see what's so special about Daniel Bryan, aside from he's a pretty good in-ring technical performer. And I appreciate that about him. Much like a Chris Benoit, although I think that Daniel Bryan was probably a little bit more charismatic than Chris Benoit, although I would say that Chris Benoit was more technically polished than Daniel Bryan. It felt like with Benoit, his moves were so crisp and they were so fluid. With Daniel, I felt like some of his moves were a little bit sloppy. He would throw in a submission, but they looked sloppy. He would do an arm hold, an arm bar, some kind of submission, and they looked kind of awkward for some reason. And I think maybe it's because his size, his lack of finesse, basically. Like, he could do technical moves. It's just that executing them didn't look particularly impressive. And maybe, that's just my opinion of Daniel Bryan. I feel like he was overrated, definitely one of the most overrated wrestlers of the past 5 years and of the 2010s decade. Number 9, The Rock. The Rock. The Rock used to be one of my favorites from the late 90s. I think he was my favorite of that late 90s, 99 period especially. He cut amazing promos, but The Rock back then was different. The Rock that we get now, since he came back in 2011, is very different. It's like a neutered version of The Rock. A very watered down version of The Rock. And that really sucks. Because the kids today and the younger fans today will never get to see, unless they go back and watch the old videos. But even back then, I think that you had to have been there to see The Rock in his prime. And I think the kids today missed out on The Rock when he was in his prime. The Rock in his prime in the late 90s is a very different character than the crap that we see now with The Rock. The Rock now is a very PG, very watered down, very neutered, very dumbed down version of what The Rock used to be. The Rock used to be very edgy. He had a great look. He had a way better look back in the late 90s with the sideburns and the shades that he would have. He actually had hair on the top of his head. He was a lot younger. He was in his late 20s back then. He had the flashy, gaudy-looking t-shirts, but they were very expensive-looking, the Versace t-shirts. And he looked absolutely cool. He looked so freaking badass back in the day, and he spoke like a badass. He even had a deeper voice. He would be like, "Finally, The Rock has come back to Memphis. Kane, you think you impressed The Rock?" He would talk like that. And then somewhere along the way in the 2000s, he started having a more manic, more high-pitched voice. He started talking like a regular dude, like, oh my god, what's going on? Whoa, oh my god, it's a people champ. Yo, Kane, I'm gonna go lay the smackdown on you, Kane. The Rock is gonna lay the smackdown. No, yeah, live here in New York. I don't know. His voice changed a lot, I think, and he sounds like a regular dude now. He talks like he's basically just Dwayne Johnson. If you ever see Dwayne Johnson talking out of character in a regular interview, on YouTube or something like that, he's like, hey guys, it's Dwayne Johnson, and my next movie is going to be a sequel to The Scorpion King, and we got another Fast and the Furious movie, and he talks like that. And that's not The Rock to me. To me, The Rock was this very charismatic, deep-voiced, eyebrow-raising, sideburns Elvis lookalike who had very charismatic presence about him, and he was younger back then too, so I think maybe age has a lot to do with it. He's older now. He's got a lot of wrinkles now, but I mean, look at Ric Flair. Ric Flair has always been charismatic, in my opinion. Ric Flair was always amazing on the mic. But with The Rock just changed. The Rock is fucking underwhelming now. He's just not special anymore. He became champion, and he was the guy that defeated CM Punk for the WWE title back in 2013. You know, he was the one who basically ended CM Punk's 400 title reign. And even at that time, I would say that CM Punk was better than The Rock in that early 2013 period. I would have preferred to see CM Punk retain and then have The Rock face him at WrestleMania or something like that, and along with John Cena, something like that. But I definitely felt like CM Punk he has a really good point about The Rock. His criticisms of The Rock is valid to a certain degree. Now, he's overrated in my opinion, so The Rock is definitely one of the more overrated wrestlers of the past 5 years, but I wouldn't include The Rock from the late 90s because that was a very different Rock. Number 10, John Cena. John Cena is a 15-time world champion. This guy has been shoved down our throats for the past 12 years, 11 years, something like that. So, obviously, we know all about John Cena now. We know what to expect from the guy. Very overrated wrestler. I felt like he was overrated even back then. I was never a fan of him, but I appreciated his microphone skills. I liked his battle rap promos because they were funny, and most of the time they were entertaining. The way that he would cut the promos, it was unexpected. What kind of punchlines he would say, what kind of funny thing he would say, and it felt like an edgy kind of presentation. After that, after he became champion in 2005, they completely changed his character. And by late 2005, he was getting booed. This wasn't like, he started getting booed like 2-3 years later. He started getting booed like later that year, in 2005. So that was 11 years ago. The problem with Cena, and everybody's addressed this, but he is very shitty as far as his character goes. I can't stand his bland, vanilla, white meat babyface because he is nothing but a cookie cutter, generic Super Cena bullshit character. I can't stand it. It is so insulting to people's intelligence that this guy would be presented as the main guy for the past 10 years. Yes, he drew in a lot of casual fans, and that's good for him, but the fact that he drew in like the younger kids, he drew in little kids. He didn't draw in like the gritty, older, mature fan base that would be fans of like the UFC and people that used to love the Attitude Era and used to love like edgy content. Cena used to be edgy back when he was a battle rapper, but then he became the bland Marine character. He became the bland babyface Super Cena character, and the never give up, and the corny t-shirts, and the bright colorful attire, and his crappy promos, and his generic good guy vanilla promos, and never give up, and hustle, loyalty, respect, and all that bullcrap, that marketing bullcrap that feels so forced and feels so annoying when you listen to him. It sucks. I think John Cena is a highly overrated wrestler. I get his talent. I see his value as a wrestler. But if I had been there, if I had been running WWE, I would have booked this guy completely different. I would have booked him as an anti-hero badass. I would have kept up with a battle rapping thing, but given him an even darker, edgier like presentation. Have him wear a black and white hoodie. Have him shave his head. Have him cut like these amazing promos. Have him be badass. Have him kick people in the nuts like he used to back in the early 2000s. Have him be a complete tough son of a bitch, a complete alpha male, and not like this fucking generic Super Cena bullshit. But that's way too late now. It's way too late to turn him heel. even if he does turn heel, which he probably won't in his freaking career. Maybe he will, but he's been babyface for way too long anyway, so people are just sick and tired of him. Cena is a 15-time champion. He's going to be a 16-time champion in the future, and he's going to tie Ric Flair's record. He might even break Ric Flair's record, which is just insane. Cena, in my opinion, is the most overrated wrestler, one of the most overrated wrestlers, certainly top 10. He is overpushed. Nothing about him is a draw to me. He doesn't make me want to buy wrestling. He doesn't make me want to buy WWE. I've never purchased anything John Cena related. I've never bought an action figure or a t-shirt, or I've never ordered a pay-per-view for John Cena after he stopped being the battle rapper, and that was 11 years ago. Because to me, he was a very generic, shitty character. There were way better characters than John Cena. To go from Stone Cold to John Cena, to go from gritty characters like Stone Cold and Rock, and even somebody like a Goldberg, to John Cena, incredible. It's amazing how low WWE fell off in the mid-2000s after John Cena. I mean, it got to a point where, like, if you put somebody like Randy Orton against John Cena, I'm choosing Randy Orton. Randy Orton was presented in a more badass kind of way. He was more anti-hero. He was more, when he was the Viper especially, and he was just this villainous, sadistic piece of shit. I like that. I like that thing about Randy Orton. You know, he had that gimmick. He had that presence about him. He was not your typical cookie-cutter bullshit character. So I appreciated Randy in that regard. So it made Randy stand out even more. Even though, like, yeah, even with Randy, I felt like Randy wasn't as charismatic as somebody like a Stone Cold or a Rock or some of the older veterans. And then, of course, it's even more evident when you see John Cena going up against Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar comes back, and remember back in that SummerSlam match they had, I think that was like 2 years ago in SummerSlam 2014, and he got decimated by Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar hit him with so many suplexes. He destroyed John Cena, and everybody loved it because Cena was demolished. You got this cookie-cutter babyface, and he just got fucking wrecked by the Beast. And so that was a great moment. But that's Cena is overrated. That's all there is to it. I feel like as a character he sucks. I feel like his in-ring is okay. You know, he's not a bad in-ring performer, but he's got very repetitive moves as well. You know, I feel like just in the ring, yeah, he's okay. But as far as his character, it's fucking garbage. So that's it for this top 10 most overrated pro wrestlers of all time. These are the wrestlers that I've seen over the years in my own personal experience, my own personal opinion seeing these wrestlers. So, thank you guys for watching this episode. Check out the channel for more videos. Subscribe and all that good stuff. And until next time, peace.